chapter is going to be about what motivates a serial killer, like the motivations, like what drives a serial killer to do what they do. Motivations, what drives a serial killer? While it might not make sense to any rational mind, all serial killers have a reason for doing what they do. However absurd and surreal this reason might sound, sometimes it can be as simple as sexual gratification or a desire to control another human being. Let's mark that. Okay. And other motivations can be unique, unbelievable, and even downright bizarre. Motivations are the backbone of serial killing, since they are what prompted these monsters to commit such horrific acts. What's the strangest serial killer motivation of all time? Herbert Mullin, a Californian serial killer who killed 13 people between 1972 and 1973, did so because he believed that it would prevent earthquakes from hitting his hometown. Mullin falls firmly into the psychotic bracket of serial killers, acting out because of a misplaced belief that warped his perception of reality. Mullin was born on April 16, 1947, on the anniversary of the famous 1906 earthquake. This little detail, combined with excessive drugs and Mullin's already twisted outlook on life greatly affected Mullin once he reached his adult years. This was certainly one of the more bizarre serial killer motivations, but of course, everything made sense in Mullin's distorted mind. Did you know Mullin first killed a homeless man with a baseball bat, believing the man was Jonah from the Bible, who had sent Mullin the telepathic message, "Kill me so others will be saved." One of Mullin's victims, a 24-year-old woman, was not initially attributed to Mullin because authorities believed it was the work of another serial killer operating at the same time, Edmund Kemper. Herbert Mullin had no particular victimology, killing both men and women, young and old. There were indeed no earthquakes during Mullin's entire killing spree, but bizarrely one hit California within weeks of his arrest. Let me move this out the way. So men tend to kill for power, domination, and sexual gratification. Power, domination, and sexual gratification, whereas women tend to kill for their own personal gain. Okay. As mentioned a few chapters previous, the majority of women are comfort killers. When a woman kills, there is usually an identifiable reason, and one that often benefits the woman's life in some way. Financial gain is a huge motivator for women serial killers, as well as removing an unnecessary burden from their life, be it a foe or an unwanted husband. And we've often heard of that because there are multiple cases to where they have businessman from Aberdeenshire, whose motivation for killing 12 men was loneliness. Between 1978 and 1983, Nelson lured young gay men back to his London apartment and then strangled or drowned them. Afterwards, Nelson would then bathe and dress up the corpses of his victims and sexually violate them before dissecting and disposing of the remains by burying them in a bonfire or flushing them down the toilet. Upon his arrest, Nelson claimed that he killed for company and that the important part of the process was not the killing but cohabitation. He relished once the deed was done, he later claimed in a prison statement. When under the pressure of work and extreme pain, of social loneliness and utter misery, I am drawn compulsively to a means of temporary escape from reality. When I take alcohol, I see myself drawn along and moved out of my isolated prison flat. I bring with me people who are not always allowed to leave because I want them to share my experiences and high feeling. Due to his similar modus operandi and motivation, Dennis Nelson is often referred to as the British Jeffrey Dahmer. So they refer to him as the British Jeffrey Dahmer because like Jeffrey, he also attacked gay men and mutilated them. What shooter killed because she didn't like Mondays? Brenda Spencer not only has one of the most unbelievable motivations in serial killing history, but she was also America's first ever female school shooter. In January 1979, Brenda Spencer, a troubled child from San Diego, California, fired 36 rounds out of her home window at children waiting outside the gates to Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Spencer was only 17 years old at the time of the shooting that killed the principal and a custodian. 8 children and police officer Rob were injured. Upon being arrested, Spencer told the police that she did it because she didn't like Mondays and that shooting people would liven up the day. The incident inspired the famous Boomtown Rat song, I Don't Like Mondays. Isn't that insane? Who was the infamous grave robber who stole corpses to make a woman's dress out of their skin? Perhaps one of the famous serial killers of all time, Ed Gein, also had one of the strangest motivations for committing the foul acts that he did. Ed Gein was something of a mama's boy, doting on his devout Christian mother from the day he was born. When she passed away, Gein went to disturbing levels to resurrect her memory. Gein would haunt the graveyard of Plantfield, Wisconsin, digging up the graves of recently deceased old women. He would then take the corpses back to his farmhouse and dissect them, planning to create a skin suit that he would wear to roleplay the part of his dead mother. But when corpses weren't enough, Gein turned to live are creations made from human skin and bone. Did you know, despite being one of the most infamous serial killers of all time, Ed Gein did not fit the FBI definition of a serial killer for many years due to only having claimed 2 victims, as well as killing 2 women. Police also suspected Gein was involved in the death of his own brother until the police raided the Gein home in 1957. No one had stepped foot in the bedroom of Ed Gein's mother, for 12 years. Go back to bed. Ed Gein is the only American serial killer to successfully plead insanity. During Ed Gein's interrogation, the arresting sheriff was so furious at Gein for what he'd done that he violently attacked Gein, causing Gein's initial conviction to be inadmissible due to head trauma. What Indian serial killer believed that he could become a mystic healer after killing 70 women? Ahmad Saradi was a serial killer from India who certainly possesses one of the most strangest motivations of all time, as well as having an abnormally high body count. Saradi's reign of terror lasted a total of 11 years between 1986 and 1997. Saradi was a professional Dakin, which is a form of a shaman in India believed to possess magical abilities. Women would visit Saradi hoping to use his wisdom to improve their lives. Saradi would take these women into the sugarcane field and bury them up to their waist, claiming it was all part of the ritual to make them more beautiful and wealthier. Once they were buried, Saradi strangled the women and then bizarrely drank their saliva. After the police finally became aware of Saradi's activities, Saradi claimed that his father's ghost had visited him in a dream and demanded he drink the saliva of 70 women to become a mystic healer. When police dug up the sugarcane field, they found the decomposing remains of 42 women. Saradi's 3 wives, who were also sisters, were also arrested for assisting Saradi in his numerous murders. That is so strange that he drank the saliva of his victims. That is so strange. Who killed because they believed their victims were poisoning him with witchcraft? Juan Covington is a serial killer from Pennsylvania who claimed that his victims were trying to telepathically poison him. Covington had a long history of mental illness brought on in his 20s when his father passed away. Covington then began acting strange, and in 1998 he shot a local Baptist pastor for seemingly no clear reason. 7 years later, in 2005, he shot a random man in the street, again with no clear motive. The same year, Covington shot and killed Patricia McDermott, a radiographer for Pennsylvania Hospital. CCTV footage led police to Juan Covington, who confessed with little provocation. Covington, a worker of the same hospital as McDermott, claimed that he killed her because he was trying to poison him with x-rays. Amazingly, Covington then confessed to the 2 previous murders, stating both men had been trying to poison him with witchcraft. How do you correlate the 2? How? What Uber driver turned spree killer killed because he claimed the devil spoke to him through said that I could say whatever I wanted to. There would be no repercussions. When it's in the black mode, it literally has control of you. It would do a little blink at me. The minute that app went from black to red, it had my presence. End quote. What's the most mundane motive a serial killer has had? In Alaska in 1979, police discovered the decomposed remains of a man along the Alaskan highway. The victim, whose identity never has been verified, was nicknamed One-Eyed Jack due to already having lost an eye in a logging accident. While One-Eyed Jack's killer was tracked down shortly after police found the body, the killer's identity has never been made public. For what reason remains unknown. All that's known is that One-Eyed Jack had been hitchhiking from Boise, Idaho, and ended up in Alaska with the man who eventually became the killer. When police asked the killer why he murdered One-Eyed Jack and discarded his corpse along the highway, the killer responded, "He was getting on my nerves." Now, no other explanation was given, and the identity of the nonchalant killer remains a mystery. I wonder why. Okay. That's interesting, very interesting. So, they asked him why, and he said that they asked him why, and he said he was annoying him. And the victim's name remains unknown. That is very unusual. It's as if, and they found the body, so it's like maybe the family didn't want the victim's information out. I'm not sure. Normally, if it's true crime, then I'm not sure. What Japanese killer claimed his own fictional creation, the Rat Man, commanded him to kill? So this is Tsutomu Miyazaki, also known as the Otaku Killer, was one of Japan's most heinous and disturbing serial killers. Between 1988 and then 1989, Miyazaki took the lives of 4 young girls throughout his native Tokyo, abducting, strangling, and then dismembering them. Miyazaki was something of a loner, spending most of his time obsessing over videotapes in his bedroom. In his teenage years, he developed an unhealthy relationship with sex and pornography, particularly obsessing over girls' hands, as Miyazaki himself had a mild hand deformity. He would mutilate his victims' bodies, sometimes drinking their blood and eating their flesh. Once the dismemberment was complete, he paid close attention to the girls' hands and limbs, even stashing some of them away in his cupboard. During his trial, he blamed his actions on the Rat Man, a fictional creature of his own making that allegedly took control of his body and mind during his crimes. Bizarrely, police did indeed find depictions of this strange creature in Miyazaki's notebooks dating back to his childhood. So he used something from his childhood to describe as to why he's committing those crimes. Wow. Why did the Russian serial killer Alexander Pichushkin only aspire to kill a certain number of victims? Alexander Pichushkin's goal was to kill 64 people, just enough people to fill an entire cheese board, and to beat the body count of his idol fellow serial killer Andrei Chikatilo. Pichushkin grew up in Soviet Russia in the 1970s and 1980s, and from a young age developed a deep obsession with the game of chess. In his teenage lasted until 2006. What? He would mostly target homeless men, but he sometimes targeted women and children too. He would lure them to an isolated area of a nearby forest and then bludgeon them to death with a hammer. At first, he began disposing of the victims' remains down as well, but later left them open to the elements. That is so cruel. Did you know Alexander Pichushkin kept a notebook in his pocket with a small chessboard sketched inside? Each square was filled in with a date correlating to his murders. At the time of his arrest, Pichushkin had filled in 61 squares, only 3 short of his goal. Pichushkin is an extremely rare type of serial killer in that his body count had a maximum limit. So Pichushkin is the only one to have had the body count, the specific body count. Only one other serial killer claimed to have a victim count limit. British serial killer Stephen Griffiths wanted to kill 14 women to be one higher than the Yorkshire Ripper. What New York nurse disguised his serial killing as heroism? Richard Angelo, aka the Angel of Death, was a nurse who poisoned 6 hospital patients in 1987. The reason? He suffered from a complex known as Hero's Syndrome. After getting a job as an emergency medical technician in Long Island, New York in 1987, Angelo became increasingly depressed at the lack of praise he was receiving from his fellow coworkers. Therefore, Angelo devised a method to look like a hero and show off his medical expertise. Angelo began poisoning patients around the hospital with a combination of paralytic drugs. He would face them their IV tubes with the substances, and then once the patients began showing signs of distress, Angelo would arrive on the scene and save them. Unfortunately, not only did several of Angelo's experiments fail and ended up killing the patients, but one of his victims eventually caught him lacing his IV tube with the drugs. In a police statement, Angelo later claimed, I wanted to create a situation where I would cause the patient to have some respiratory distress or some problem, and through my intervention or suggested intervention or whatever, come out looking like I knew what I was doing. I had no confidence in myself. I felt very inadequate. What bizarre serial killer tried to steal his victims' voices? Edward Leonsky was a boxer, bodybuilder, and U.S. soldier who had a strange obsession with women's voices. While on military duty in Melbourne, Australia in 1942, Leonsky strangled 3 women, eventually cementing his moniker as the Brownout Strangler. Leonsky had something of a reputation amongst his fellow soldiers. He was a troubled young man who drank to oblivion regularly. He was a show-off and a womanizer. As a child, Leonsky was exposed to regular domestic violence from his father, but his ailments were then soothed by his mother's sweet singing voice, which sent him to sleep. This fond memory then grimly echoed in Leonsky's later years. By night, Leonsky would target lone women on the streets of Melbourne, strangling them and leaving their bodies for the morning crowd to stumble upon. He killed three women in 15 days. That is insane. So imagine how scared these women must have been, because they're seeing this big ass bodybuilder approach them and take their lives. Leonsky was quickly apprehended and later confessed his motive for the killings, saying that he held a sinister fascination with female voices, particularly when they were singing. Indeed, one of Leonsky's victims had been a professional bar singer. Leonsky claimed he wanted to help. He wanted to keep his victims' voices for himself. What serial killing duo wanted to kill one woman of every teenage age? Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker, more famously known as the Toolbox Killers, were two of the most depraved and sadistic serial killers of all time. While cruelty and torture were their primary motivation for killing, Bittaker and Norris endeavored to complete a collection. They wanted to kill one girl for every age between 13 and 19. Bittaker and Norris first became acquainted in prison in 1977. Then, once they both were released, they teamed up and began cruising around Southern California in 1979, planning to abduct and torture women. They would trick girls into hitchhiking with them, or simply snatch them off the streets into their van they nicknamed the Murder Mac. Once inside, Bittaker and Norris would restrain and gag the victims, then sexually assault and torture them for several hours. They would mostly use hand tools to carry out these horrific acts, eventually killing their victims via strangulation or with ice picks through their brains. That is such a morbid way to go. As a killing duo, Bittaker and Norris took the lives of 5 young women, never achieving the goal of killing one girl for every teenage age. The pair would often record their torture sessions with pictures and audio tapes. Did you know a brief section of the tape recording of the Toolbox Killer's final murder was played in court, causing many of the people present to flee the room in horror? The same tape is used as part of the FBI training for recruits to desensitize them to human violence. Jonathan Demme, director of the hit film The Silence of the Lambs, was given access to the tape for research for the film. He described it as the most disturbing thing he'd ever heard. The tape has never been publicly released, although a very disturbing written transcript is available. So it caused the people to flee the room, the FBI using it as a training module so that people that join are desensitized to human violence is crazy, conviction. Over 4 weeks in 1994, American serial killer Dana Sue Gray killed 3 women for a whole season for the sole reason of getting her fix of retail therapy. Dana Sue Gray was in financial trouble. She was unemployed and had built up a mountain of debt. So desperate for money, Gray went to extreme lengths to fix her issue. She began murdering people for money. She strangled 3 women around Southern California, and barely an hour after their deaths, used their credit cards to go on wild shopping sprees. Now that is insane. I like shopping too, and I'm sure a lot of other people like shopping, but to the extent of killing someone and taking their money is insane. Gary's final intended victim, as an anti-store worker, survived her attack and was able to provide investigators with a description of Gray. What serial killer murdered women because of his shoe fetish? Jerry Brudos, aka the shoe fetish slayer, was a serial killer and necrophile from Webster, South Dakota. Brudos was abused by his mother from an early age because she wanted to give birth to a girl. At 5 years old, Jerry's obsession with women's shoes began when he found a pair of high heels in a junkyard. The following year, Brudos was caught trying to steal his first grade teacher's shoes. By his teenage years, Brudos was already in and out of mental hospitals around his home state. He abducted his first woman aged only 17, threatening to kill her if she didn't do as he commanded. He was promptly caught and sent to another mental hospital where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and extreme misogyny. Brudos' killing spree began in 1968. He first lured a woman selling encyclopedias into his home and killed her, then abducted a stranded woman on the side of a highway. He then began abducting women off the street, taking them to his home and strangling them. After their deaths, Brudos would have intercourse with the dead bodies and then take trophies in the form of shoes and amputated body parts. Then he'd weigh their bodies down with mechanical parts and dump them in rivers around South Dakota. Okay guys, so the next chapter is going to be Killing is My Business, Serial Killers and Jobs, okay? I'm assuming the next chapter is going to be something about like how they work a job, but yet there's still serial killing on the side. I'm not sure, but we'll have to find out in the next chapter. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was able to relax you and inform you about some of the motives that serial killers have, and I hope that you have a great sleep